first minute. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Episode 50 of Hxro Labs Live. Here I am back in the studio on a Monday in November. It's basically summer weather out where I'm from, which is strange because I am in Canada. So it's a beautiful day. Just want to make sure I mute that feed. I'm hearing it come through on one of you guys on the back end there. I've got a special guest here in the studio that I cannot wait to get live here with and interview and share with you guys. He's got some incredible stories, and not the least of which is what happened last night on his daily fantasy league on DraftKings, or I should say daily fantasy tournament, a qualifier for the championships, making big money, wrote some books, started a company. It's exciting stuff. So can't wait to get him in here. And in the meantime, though, just before we go live with that, because that is going to be the meat of today's episode. And I want to make sure we get a quick look at the markets because kind of a lot happened over the weekend. Some fairly big news coming out this morning with regards to a vaccine, with Pfizer talking about possibly having a 90% success hit rate on their vaccine that's going through trials. So naturally, the S&P popped to new highs on a pretty violent gap north in the pre-market activity. So we'll pull that up real quick. Talk about what it means for Bitcoin, which is basically just parked at the resistance that we've been watching. Actually got front run a little bit. Go through the Ethereum chart, ETH BTC, take a look at the dominance, and I'm going to share a couple of altcoins that I'll be watching throughout the week as we go, and more importantly, what I'll be watching them for as we look for higher lows to come in and tell us if we did, in fact, get a bottom. So without further delays, let me flip over to my screen share here, and we'll get through that in just a moment. There we go. All right, so as you can see here, this is the weekly Bitcoin chart that I have been watching and that we've been kind of following along. And it is overbought on the Willy. So first and foremost, when it's really overbought like this, doesn't mean it's going to come down, but it's definitely not a time to be racing in and making your biggest bets, okay? It's hard to get bullish down here at the lows, but that's probably the safest time to be getting in, as it turns out, right? At all of these dips. We just finished a pretty aggressive move for about 5 weeks now. It's not the time to call your banker and take out a loan against the house. It's just doesn't even matter if it went to 20K and you're like, see, it's just as a rule, just don't do that. Don't crank the risk up when markets are overbought and mania is in. And I think the news even came out today. I saw this nice news report. She came on and she's just like, oh yeah, Bitcoin's catching a bid, Paul Tudor Jones, all this. I mean, when it hits mainstream like that, does not mean the top is in. It's just not the time. If you want to be a sharpshooter, if you want to play from strength, it's not the time to crank your risk up. So keep that in mind as we park ourselves in all of these profit objectives. We just front ran the chaos level by like $100. We got front run on this weekly resistance. And, you know, with a bit of a vacuum here, you've probably heard a lot of people talking about after we broke through this 14, 13, 5 level. You could expect a fairly aggressive move up to the next major resistance because there wasn't a lot of volume traded in here. So there's not going to be any major sellers waiting in here with their orders. They're just going to wait up here, and that's what we got. And because there were so many looking to take profit at that level, we didn't even get there. There was a front run. So we actually hit resistance around 15,900. I don't think that's the top on this run. I think it would be a little too easy, but let's take a look. It's not really. Okay, let's make sure my mic is coming through. 15 degrees in Nova Scotia, Dave Millett says. How are we doing on the mic? Okay, perfect. So that's my thoughts on Bitcoin. Now, looking over here at Ethereum BTC. Now, this is really the pair I've been watching closely because, as you guys know, I want to get long on all coins as close to the bottom, as close to their trend reversal as possible. So this spike up on volume was really encouraging to see off of this key support that we've been watching. ETH USD chart, I mean, what's not to love about this? We've got a massive bottom formation over the last 2 years. The weekly just broke and closed at new highs. So this little pullback here is really just like a candle body close retest. Pretty bullish above these levels. I'm not too worried about the $20, $30, $50 swings at this point. This is just a monstrous bullish formation, not something to fade unless you're getting some major weekly, daily reversal, which we're just not. Despite what was a bit of a shocker this morning. I think a lot of people were a little concerned with this big dump this morning. See if I can zoom in a little better, maybe on an hourly. Just in the pre-market New York kill zone, we had a big pop up on Bitcoin as well, and then just a nasty dump. But don't let that stuff change your thesis on the high time frame, right? Like a lot of people are really worried about like, well, gold's dumping and stocks are rallying. What's Bitcoin going to do? Like, don't worry about it. It's really bullish right now. So is Ethereum. So we're not going to let Pfizer news or a Monday pump on gold change our tune. Now we've got a pump chaser zone sitting around 420 to 430. So any pullback into that at this point to me is a gift. It might break this like flag structure. So I actually don't love it as much from the 4-hour view, but on the daily, I mean, we just broke this resistance, right? This was resistance last week. I think we've now can say that that will act as support, and we can watch that for retest as we already just got a pretty good bounce off it. So consolidation above support after a breakthrough, not so bad. Again, not a time I'm rushing in to crank up and add a ton of risk, but I'm certainly not rushing to get out on hourly dumps. And real quick, we got our dominance chart, which is just peaking at 786. Nice rejection off of that. And we're just kind of consolidating pretty much right at our target that we've had on here for about 2 months. And this doesn't change the risk off situation just yet. But if we can get something like this, and this is what I'll be watching for, we get a high, get a lower high, get a break of these lows. There's your new downtrend, and it's going to be a new window. And that's when I'll just take this window here, copy, paste, and drag, and we'll have ourselves a little risk on window. And that, as you guys know from seeing this chart, that could be the real party. I mean, if we get down into this, I mean, that's what happens if, and we got to look at it on this time frame. That's what happens if ETH BTC chart just goes crazy, right? I mean, I expect there could be consolidation here. Who knows? But I mean, like as we move up to there, that's going to be that massive breakdown in dominance if we get it, most likely. So that's the kind of stuff you got to be excited about. So lastly, just before we get into our interview today and hanging out with Jonathan, who's here waiting in the wings, I'm still ticking away on my ocean long. Nothing's really changed over the weekend. This is a 4-hour trade, so that'll probably take a few weeks to play out. But it's moving nicely, actually. Just moved to new highs this morning. UFT, Nick and I are bullish on this one. We've been watching it. It has rallied again through the weekend, capping at 75 cents. We're seeing some sells come in, but the wallet balance is growing. There are more holders every day, about 3% compounding gain every day in overall wallet holders. So keeping an eye on that. Blue Zell, another one I've been watching. Show you real quick. Bounced right off the support entry box, the 8-to-1 GAN and the 88.6. So really watching. Now, specifically, what am I watching for? Somebody says, well, look, man, you missed the bounce. That was your entry. I'm actually always going to be looking for the higher low. So I want to see off that bounce, get up. Sure, there's going to be a bounce off the bottoms. There's always a bounce off support. Buyers step in. They're going to FOMO in. But then the bears are always lurking, especially after a big downtrend like this. So it's all about that higher low. So wherever this move goes to, maybe it comes up to the scan arc or angle, get that fib, these higher lows. Okay, that's what I want to look for. Get in there, get some bullish market structure, and go. So that's about it. I've got a nice short list here, and we'll go over that in more detail as the week goes on. Or Twitter, might even get a bonus feed in tomorrow, later in the week. Who knows? Nick's going to be live on Wednesday. But more importantly, I want to flip back to the studio today because we have a special guest here. A lot of anticipation on my part. Over here. And the odds, I don't know. I guess you play every week probably, John. You can hear me in the back end, but let's get him here in the studio. And got quite a lengthy sort of experience in gambling, betting, all kinds of stuff. I really want to let him speak to that. But he's got started in sports analytics, writing in a blog in college, doing film breakdowns for the Dallas Cowboys, draft analytics, and from there has started a company, Fantasy Labs, in 2015, and basically wrote the book on daily fantasy sports. So without further delay, thank you, Jonathan Bales. How's it going?
Hey, it's going well. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the great intro.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, man. I mean, I always talk about managing risk and taking risk off and, really capturing as much gains and all that stuff. So kind of like taking the DD out of trading and gambling. But make no mistake about it, trading is gambling. And, I had a student last year in one of my classes, and I said, I was talking a little bit about trading to them, and the girl just sits back. She goes, so you're just gambling? And I was like, what? No, No, it's a business, but kids will be the most honest people you'll ever to. So, having said that, you've managed to turn it into a career, and you do it professionally. Not just trading. I think a lot of people think, well, of course it's a career, but sports betting, things like that. I've always been fascinated by how you can sort of ride the swings in that, and you've taken it sort of a step further by establishing your own business. Do you want to talk perhaps a little bit about what got you started and led to you founding Fantasy Labs?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly. I think trading is gambling, but I also think being a salaried employee is gambling, and I think pretty much everything that you do in life is some form of risk reward, and there are differences maybe between like sports betting or poker or trading and going to a casino and playing blackjack. But really that difference is like a few percentage points, right? That like we say if you're plus EV that it's an investment, and then otherwise it's gambling or something like that. But there's really not too much of a fundamental difference, I think. But yeah, so my background is in sports analytics and primarily football analytics. I was writing in college and just noticed I was writing about football and stuff and had a blog, and noticed that coaches were doing really suboptimal things in lots of different situations. They were way worse than they even are now, and they're still pretty bad. So I started breaking down, why they were doing certain things like not going for it on fourth down, or not doing onside kicks, or things like that. And yeah, I started working with an NFL team, and then sort of quickly noticed that there's not that much politics unless you sort of use it yourself to gamble. And I had always been a really big fantasy football fan, just season-long fantasy football. So I wrote a season-long fantasy football book, like kind of just for fun. It was really just me sorting through data to win my home league, which is really sad. But yeah, so I was doing all this stuff anyway and published it, and it did really well, like way better than anything else I was doing at that time. And also around that time, like DraftKings and FanDuel had there's FanDuel first in, I don't know, maybe 2011 or something like that, had popped up, and I started to play there and figured I would do really well because I was really good at season long, and I just got killed.
Yeah. It's tough, man.
Very different game to play DFS than season long, completely different game. And so I decided that I would write a book about DFS, and that was really just a way for me to become an expert at it and like interview all the top players to see how they were winning. And that was pretty successful because I met a bunch of top players. One of them is my business partner to this day in pretty much every venture. And yeah, so then I just started learning and playing, and became a DFS player for a while. That was what I was focused on completely all day, every day was playing DFS. And DFS over time has it's not solved by any means, but it's become more and more efficient, just like poker did. Like trying to win in poker now is so different. I'm sure it's the same thing in trading now versus 2017 or something, like completely different game. There's bigger players. It's just way more efficient market.
You can already see it happening in crypto as well over the years. The efficiency is increasing, and arbitrages, everything's getting watered down.
Yep. Yeah. So it's same thing, and noticed that trend happening, and so I started an analytics and tools site called Fantasy Labs in 2015, I believe, late 2015, and that did really well. We had one investor after we launched, who was Mark Cuban, and then in 2017 we sold the company to Churning Group, who owns a few online properties, and did that really because we wanted to have exposure to sports betting, which we knew would be legalized, and it's been a more rapid pace to legalization of betting than we anticipated. But yeah, so we sold that and started a larger sports betting and sports gambling company called Action Network in 2017.
Beauty. And Chernin Group actually owns Barstool Sports as well, do they not? And Headspace?
Yeah, but I believe when they acquired Fantasy Labs, they owned 5 online properties.
Okay.
One of them was the biggest one, I think, was Crunchyroll, which is I don't know anything about anime, but I think it's like kind of like the Netflix for anime.
Yeah.
Typically, it's really big. Yeah, Headspace, a meditation app, and Barstool Sports, a lot of people are familiar with.
Which everyone this year, of course, is familiar in trading with the old Davy Day Trade in
Davey,
Portnoy.
oh yeah, Davey.
Yeah. Don't suppose you have any good Davy stories on you, do you? Do you get to? Do you guys cross paths in that acquisition?
I've crossed paths with him, but not too much. Not as much as you'd think. Like business wise, Fantasy Labs did a World Series of Poker deal with Barstool before we got acquired. But yeah, I know a couple stories, but none that I can tell.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, well, I thought you brought up a really interesting point. I mean, you basically got into DFS, saw how hard it was. You're getting killed, and then, you know, I think a lot of people write a book. They say, oh, you know, I'm an expert. I've got 20 years experience. I'm going to write a book. That's going to be my, you know, my play going out, whatever. And you said, you know, I want to learn more about this. I'm going to write a book to get access. And you kind of leveraged being an author to essentially gain access to some of the, you know, the winning circles, so to speak. And that's worked really well for you. So, you know, shout out to that approach. I don't think I've heard of that before, and really to gain access and become an expert by writing the book is pretty sweet. And you've published quite a few now, actually, I noticed, for fantasy baseball, fantasy football. So
yeah,
you want to speak any more to the writing side of that, or?
Yeah, the books. I think I have maybe 19 or something like that, but they're really easy to write. You know, it's not like I have so much respect for people that can write fiction, and I could never do that. It's so difficult. You know, versus, you know, me like looking up historical DFS trends, and, you know, I have all this data and I just kind of write about it. It sort of writes itself. It's not that difficult. So yeah, very different type of writing, but yeah, I love to write, and I think writing in general, you know, you don't have to write a book, but even publishing stuff on a blog or whatever is really useful, because writing sort of makes you think logically. Like, you can't bullshit when you write, and so it crystallizes your ideas. And, you know, writing is, to me, the most direct sign of a clear mind. Like, you know, not everyone who is smart can write well, but if you can write really well, you're definitely very smart. So I think it's just like a generally really valuable thing to do.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. I actually just wrote a thread on our Twitter, like on Thursday, first time in really that I wrote one. Thing took me 5 hours, and it was like, you know, 4-minute read. So, I mean, starting to grasp the appreciation of having to organize ideas and really get it out there. And like you say, coming from that, I have a much more clear understanding of what I think about altcoins right now, which is what I was writing about. Now, beyond that, you actually, you know, the proof is in the pudding. Even last night with the Sunday night championship qualifier. Do you want to talk a bit about that? I noticed you tweeted out last night a big win, basically a winner take all, something north of $60,000 on daily fantasy football yesterday. Do you want to take us through? I mean, maybe we got to go to your site and read your book to get all the sweet alpha that went into making those picks yesterday, because I do play a little bit of daily fantasy. But what could you throw at us, maybe sharing a little about that experience yesterday?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, no, I'm not one to like, you know, just leverage that to promote things. So you definitely don't have to do that, although I think it's great. But yeah, I mean, so in DFS, we have like qualifiers. Same thing in poker. You might win a satellite to go to a bigger tournament, and there's the same thing in DFS. So they run qualifiers to get to a championship at the end of the year. And the championship is like pretty big stakes. So this year it's 200 people and 12.5 million prize pool, 2.5 million to first. And like, I think 15 people win at least 100K or something, which would be, I don't know, like 8% of the pool or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really high stakes, but to get into the qualifiers, yeah, they're usually winner take all. So, you might have like a stat correction or something that drops you from winning the $62,000 in equity in this very large tournament to like effectively nothing. Yeah, so the swings in those are really difficult. And even yesterday, there was I got really lucky. Like I probably shouldn't have won that. The guy right behind me had 2 touchdowns dropped, and he had like a really favorable call on the clock stoppage at the end of the game. It's just like to me, when those things happen, like you can't really help but recognize how much chance there is, and just like that went away to overreact to my lineup. Like, oh, I did such a good job when like this guy like really dropped a ball at the end, and I would have won nothing. If he caught it.
What a sweat!
Yeah,
it's an absolute.
It's such a ridiculous sweat, but there's also just so much. There's so much luck involved. That
yeah. Now let's pull up my screen share here, John, real quick. I've got your feed up here so that people can get a little visual of what we're looking at. For those of you who have played DraftKings, this is what the sort of tournament standings. Now, this is what I'm used to looking at. It's usually never, it's never with my name in it, but I'm always watching who's in the lead of the tournaments I'm in. I did one really good qualifier for like a hockey one years ago. That was the first time I ever got first, but it was like a ticket I won. So, no big stories for me, but I mean, first place, $62,625, basically winner take all, as you said. Second place, what a drop. Basically nothing if you're thinking about the comparison. And this guy you're saying in second place had Herbert, who just dropped 2 TDs at the end of the game. So too bad, so sad. But that's the nature of the sweat. That's sort of, that's where the excitement comes in. Now, were you watching the games? And I remember in our pre-interview, you actually mentioned that you don't always watch while you're playing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like football a lot, and I think there's value in watching football. So I do watch football. Sometimes I will try not to, but there's something in DFS called late swap, which is basically like if you whatever players you have that didn't play yet, so the late game players, you can swap out for other players whose games didn't start.
Okay.
So you have to look. You have to look before the 4 p.m. games start, because it's the biggest edge in DFS, because people just like let their lineups ride, but it's a chance to literally completely redo your lineup with all this additional information. It's very, very important. You have to swap. So I have to look every Sunday, even if I don't want to, even if I'm doing something. In general, I try not to look too much at the fantasy stuff, but yeah, you have to look. So I pretty much know if I'm live or not for a big cash before 4 o'clock, because I have to look at the lineups. So when I'm doing really well, that becomes more challenging to not sort of monitor it.
Yeah, and I can imagine. I mean, I guess there's probably a lot more strategy we don't need to get into today around maybe like if you're up a bunch, you take some more high floor type guys into the 4s, or maybe you're behind, you're like, fuck it, I'll take some flyers on these guys that might go boom or bust. I imagine there's a deeper strategy there.
Yeah, exactly. There's a ton of strategy, and if you're playing someone head to head, there's so much game theory. Like you could try to figure out who they have and block them so they can't even possibly catch you. Figuring out the swap stuff is really, really important.
Nice. And I mean, I'm honestly asking for myself too. Like, is this some of the stuff you guys kind of go into on Fantasy Labs? Is there sort of a community and there's some strategy stuff and analytics? Like, is that what that's about? Or I haven't.
Yeah. We have something that's called a late swap optimizer, which basically takes your lineup, compares it to every lineup in the field at any given time, your probability to win, and then suggests like the optimal plays to swap to and things like that. You can just change your lineup. But Fantasy Labs is mostly centered around modeling. So we have all of this historic DFS and in-game data, and you tell us what you think is important rather than, these are the best plays. We don't really do that. Like, who knows? Maybe.
Well, because then everyone picks them too, so they get watered down, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, exactly.
glad I have Tom Brady. He's at 85% picked today, or whatever, right? So, I mean, I remember like with NHL was the only time I ever did a lot of sports betting and a lot of daily fantasy, and you could pick some of those value guys that are like, okay, this guy's moving up on the center power plays, top line center, playing with Crosby, and he's only 3,000. Get him in your lineup, and I mean, that's about the extent of my daily fantasy. But like I said, I never went full, never did the grind quite to your extent. And but beyond daily fantasy, you've got some interesting stories that even just a quick Google found last week, even relating to a big bet on a push-up challenge and the gambling Olympics in 2018. Which of those two would you like to speak to first? I think we should get a little deep dive on each of those, or shallow dive.
I mean, the push-ups, I think, was like, it was good.
I mean, that's insane.
I'm proud of both. The gambling Olympics was like a collection of a bunch of top gamblers. We had like Brandon Adams, who's one of the top gamblers overall, and Peter Jennings and Joey Ingram and Adam Levitan and Scott Blumstein, who won the World Series of Poker and stuff. And we just played a bunch of different games, and there was a lot of variance in that. And yeah, that was very fun. But the push-up challenge was psychologically very, very tough. The bet was like, some DFS guys were talking on Twitter about how many push-ups they could do in maybe 24 hours or something. And we settled on a bet of that I had to do 2,400 push-ups in 12 hours.
Oh, God.
So that was the bet, and we live streamed it. But I thought it was just going to be like me and my like DGen friends, and like over 250,000 people watched it. It was very tough.
I mean, if anything, you got to take the over when you get that kind of adrenaline with the added crowd. I imagine that helped you a bit. But what would you say was the most challenging part of that? Like, at what point did you just go like, holy fuck, I'm halfway there and my arm is like roasted?
It was around 1,600 or something like that. I took a break. I showered, and my heart rate was like 135 after like an hour of rest. It was really bad. It was probably like really stupid to continue this challenge. People were like, and then after I learned about like something called rhabdo or something, like your muscles can just like eat away at themselves. It was a stupid bet probably, but we won it.
So you did end up making it.
Yeah.
And how much time did you have left at the end?
I finished just after 11 hours, but could I have done more? I mean, I was like pretty close to my limit, but I don't know. Who knows? That's
intense. And I think you had a couple grand on that bet yourself, right? Probably a whole bunch of side bets too.
But yeah, I had a lot more than the bet with that person was for 2K or something like that. But yeah, we got a lot more down. And I mean, there were people that I know of people that lost tens of thousands, maybe even six figures on the bet.
Take it under.
Yeah,
to stick it to them. I mean, that's pretty epic. Now, what was the recovery like? Because I remember one day in uni, I mean, it must have been 10 years ago now, and I was working out with my buddy who was a bodybuilder, and I hadn't worked out in months. And he goes in, he's like, it's bicep day, right? So he's doing biceps for 2 hours, and I joined him. And the next, like for a week, I was like T-Rex. My arms were just crunched up like around my hand. I couldn't type. I had this essay to write. I mean, what was your recovery like on a 1 day 2,400 push-up? Like,
it was really bad. It was really bad for a long time. I couldn't even like hold a push-up position the next day. It was really bad.
No kidding. I mean, you got to get into the extra stuff there, right? Like ice bath and all this, like, whatever. You probably had some like high end. You got to do a little extra when you're trying to recover from that.
So yeah, I was mostly just like laying around. But
just don't move for a week. Now, I imagine through your career. Now, I want to get in. I know you got some. I know you got some DGen like sports betting, whatever. Some of the more exotic things you've bet on. But before we get into that fun stuff coming up a little later on, I want to talk to you about maybe some of the tougher parts of your career because I know as a trader, and even just on these streams and the people we interact with and the people on Twitter, 90% of people over time will lose money trading in the market. And I imagine the numbers are similar in gambling, possibly even higher when you just think about like the average Joe's walking into casinos. And so I imagine through your career, you've had some swings. I know myself, prior to getting more into trading, even now that I'm trading, I still have some pretty crazy swings, but I've got them managed pretty well. What are some of the darker moments perhaps you want to speak to? And then more importantly, how you pulled yourself out and what advice you could give with some of the things you've learned about, getting through that. Because if you want to do this for a living, if you basically take risk for a living, you're going to have those coping mechanisms, those, resiliency. Maybe you have a story or some advice you could share.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many instances in DFS where because the payouts are so top heavy, you might lose like, 6 figures on a meaningless catch in garbage time at the end of the last game or something. It happens all the time. It's just like, it's part of playing. Those things, they used to get to me so much when I first started playing. Like, how do you not, especially if you are just building up a bankroll type of thing, how do you not get emotional about like losing a bunch of money on something stupid or a stat correction or
Yeah. Well, and to translate that real quick to trading, I mean, I put out a theta short, was one of these shit coins on Friday, and it moved up, hit my stop loss, and then overnight just tanked, and it completely hit my take profit. I was like, okay, so I know that's part of the game, and I'm fine. But instead of making $6,000 overnight, I lost $1,000, and like that pissed me off. Like, that's stressful, and so that translation to you with DFS, you're like, I know the variance will come back to me in the end. But today, that garbage time catch just wrecked my final table.
Yeah. So there's always those. I'm okay at dealing with those, I think, just because it's part of it. The worst swing I ever had personally, financially, was actually in crypto. Gamblers have been exchanging value in cryptocurrency, Ethereum, and Bitcoin for a long time. That's actually how I got into it. I got so lucky to even be a part of it because, you just have all these people either telling you to buy it or just, you need to send someone money or you need to get money. And they want to send it in a Ethereum or, I mean, that's what happened for me. So that's how I got into it. But then, the swings in crypto are obviously super sick, and there's not really like a floor per se. Like if the most I can lose in DFS is whatever I play. You theoretically can lose whatever you have in crypto, but not, you're not expecting that to happen. But
you don't expect your coins to go to zero, right? So you might put in like a little more. Like, if you lose your DFS tournament, it's a zero pay.
Yeah.
But if you buy some Ethereum, or in this case, maybe like one of these dead coins, you don't expect it to go to zero. So I see what you mean. Like the floor can completely fall out of a coin.
Yeah. So I had some really sick swings there.
What was your nastiest one? Like, what coin just
I remember waking up at like maybe 3 a.m. or something. I just like woke up and looked on my phone, and it was like China has declared cryptocurrency illegal or something like that.
September 4th, 2017.
Yeah.
I remember the day. I was there at 4 a.m. We're right there with you, bro. China banned Bitcoin. That was not fun. That was a 3-week slide.
A crazy swing. And I had by that point, I had a pretty good percentage of my net worth in cryptocurrency. I still do. Probably, I don't know what's normal for you guys. Like, you really, you're in it and you really believe it. But I think I have more than they recommend. I know that.
Well, 5% is soft, man. You're not even into crypto if you're 5%. So, I mean, I'm doing this full time, every day, all day. I have more money in my trade portfolio than I do my bank account by a great sum. So I think you're in good company if you're sitting over 20, 30, 40, 70% exposure. But I'm also trading, and I'm looking at levels, and I've got orders in place, and I'm I'm sitting now on stuff that I made earlier this year. Like I've built a base, and I'm not going to let what happened in 2018 happen to me again. But there's always risk, right? There's risk that Binance could go down. I don't know. I doubt it, but it could happen. So I spread my things out a few different exchanges. But it's so funny that, you know, the second you said China banned Bitcoin, I was like, oh yeah. And that is the thing people don't remember. You look back at 2017, you think, man, that must have been so nice. Those guys are so lucky. It was really the last 8 weeks of 2017. And for altcoins, really the last 6 weeks or 5 weeks. But it was a scary ride because right before China banned Bitcoin at the start of September, those were all-time highs. And so we're just like, yeah, was at the top. China just banned Bitcoin. Oh, it's been fun. 3 weeks pull back, and then it was just launched, and it's like, haha, you're an idiot if you sold the dip. So I mean, it's not easy. And I think you bring up an interesting point. You woke up at 3 a.m. Football does not play at 3 a.m. Right? You get these nice windows in the stock market, arguably even casinos, poker tournaments. There's limits. Crypto is this 24-hour, 365 beast. What would you say to somebody who's in a rough spot right now? I'm sure you've been there, whether it's just an emotional loss one day or even a slide, right? That's the toughest one when you have a few losses. The variance is so high in DFS. I imagine you can go on for some weeks where maybe it's just a garbage time catch 3 times in a row. What would you say to somebody right now who's listening and just is like, dude, I'm in a rough spot. You know, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. Have you been there yourself? And if so, how'd you get yourself out of it? And what advice could you share?
Yeah, I think everyone gets in those spots. I've always tried to think about risk slightly differently in that once you have a certain base, you should be your number one goal should not be optimizing. It should be avoiding in gambling we call it going busto. Don't lose all your money.
Yeah, that's
goal number one. And whatever EV you think you have, it can only come after you avoid risk of ruin. It has to come after that. So you avoid like that tail risk, and then try to optimize after that. And then I would say the things that help me probably when things don't go my way in general would be whether it's DFS or crypto or business or whatever, would be remembering that the variance that's inherent to those games is sort of what makes them sustainable. So, if I didn't lose even when I shouldn't sometimes, then the game wouldn't exist and I couldn't make money in general. So
like the potential from gain really is founded in the potential for absolute wrecked.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I was just watching a video of Phil Ivey interview today. He's like one of the top, maybe the best poker player ever. And he was talking about a hand that he lost where Chris Moneymaker sucked out, but Moneymaker went on to win and sort of started the poker boom.
Yeah, that was like what, 2000, early 2000s. I remember Chris Moneymaker and his convertible ripping around with the crazy, like the greatest name ever for a guy who just won the World Series. Like,
yeah, so Ivy lost and he said he didn't have that much money to his name at that point. I don't know how much he had, but he lost millions probably on that hand in the moment, but then ultimately made tens of millions after that. So the variance is, hopefully, if you're smart, you get it back later. Yeah. And then whenever those things happen, it's natural to feel emotional. I think it's very important to you never make any consequential decisions when you're emotional, when you're on tilt. You do things that have long-term value, like working out or just reading or whatever it is. And then recently I read Ray Dalio's book, Principles, and he had a great suggestion that's helped him, which is when you're on tilt, that you use those emotions, those natural reaction to, whatever happens in your life as a trigger to think logically. And you have to practice it and train yourself to do that. But, you can use it in trading, but you could also use it if you get into a fight with your girlfriend. Your natural your natural reaction is to just be emotional about it and yell and whatever. But you should be using that as a trigger to think rationally about the situation. And when you condition yourself to do that, I think that just generally you're going to make better decisions.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. And I actually just wrote that down because, one of the things I studied in university was psychology, and the ability, you can really retrain yourself. You can train these kinds of triggers. And so your point there, I think, as my takeaway would be, as Ray Dalio said, to use the emotions you get from tilt to force yourself to think logically. So when you recognize that feeling you're having, you're just like, okay, whoa, stop, pause, think, maybe put down the buy, sell button or whatever, flatten your account, chill out.
And everyone has those feelings. You're never going to stop feeling that. Like, the goal shouldn't be to stop feeling emotional about a downswing. It's like, that's going to happen.
That's what algos are for, right?
It gets dulled over time, of course, but when you feel that, like, step away and just like sort of analyze the problem outside of yourself, like almost analyze it as if it's for someone else and you're giving advice. And it's probably a better decision than what you naturally feel like you should do.
That's a really good point, because when I'm even just on stream, an example for me, actually, I've done some coaching as a teacher and coached some like grade 6 basketball teams and stuff. And I was never a great player, but man, I could coach pretty well. I could always tell the kids, I know what you need to do right now, because teaching something often helps you get that clarity. So like you say, using the example as if it was somebody else, so you don't have that emotional attachment to it, that money attachment. And then that helps you kind of sort through the problem. Car Young Tom made an interesting point. He says, it sounds like Bales has always had pretty good bankroll management. You're asking him about dark times, but it doesn't sound like he's been there, because he's been really smart about that. And I mean, that's the gist I get from your stories as well, is that even through some of your swings, you never put yourself in a position to just get completely washed out, obviously, because most people who do that by habit don't end up with any measure of success. I mean, was there a time when you just went against your bankroll managements and had to sort of like put yourself on timeout and step away?
Yeah, of course, but never to the point that I like risk ruining everything. I'll also say on one end, I've been extremely lucky, and ignoring the luck component would be foolish. Like, oh, like he did all these things, so this is the right way to act. No, I probably just like ran really hot in a lot of ways, especially in business. Like, I don't think I'm a great business person. I think I have some good ideas or something, but got really lucky. I think in that regard, especially in that regard, like
I think you have a little good amount of skill to get lucky. I mean, it's hard to get lucky just sitting on your ass. I mean, give yourself a break. I think you probably put in some work there, but you're saying maybe you had some lucky breaks along the way.
Yeah, of course. I think it's just like natural to it's easy to chalk things up to luck when things don't go your way, and then when things do go your way, to look at all the things that you probably did right. So yeah, I think trying to navigate that and figure out when you're doing a good job and when results might be just sort of lucky is a really important and rare sort of skill.
Yeah, and that's actually a great time to plug one of my favorite books is The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And that's really, I don't know if you've read that one. It's basically he dives into, sort of the nature or nurture of guys like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and the Beatles and hockey players, and says, like, are these guys really great? Are they one of a kind, or did they just end up in an interesting series of events? Like Bill Gates had access to computers at 10 years old when no one else did, so he became a programmer. Like, and that's an interesting question that we've just raised here around skill versus luck. Now,
the other thing I'll say really quickly is that I on the other end, I did not start with like a bankroll. My family did not have money. I had no money. I was trying to live in New York and had no money. I had to write, like, I was working all day, every day, just to pay for stuff. And still I'm grateful to be in the situation that I was. I had a great family and things like that. But I know what it's like to truly have nothing. So even if I didn't go from something back to nothing, I know what that's like. And that the advice that I would give there is, usually I think people are too eager to like save money and optimize things and whatever. But in the beginning, you should do everything you can to just get some money, like whether it's 50K or whatever, everything, work, every job, save money, don't do anything, and get to that point, because it's so valuable. You have to get out of debt. You have to have some like base level. You have to work so hard to get to that point, no matter what it takes.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because you can't. I mean, I think I want to step back to your number one rule, which is always make sure you have money to come back and play the game tomorrow. You got to have capital to take risks, to seek these opportunities. I mean, even on an extreme level, like just to get certain jobs, you got to have the money to wear the nice suit, like whatever it is. You just need to have that base, and that's actually my trade mentor's number one rule too. He said the golden rule: always make sure you have something to come back and play the game tomorrow. And in my story, I mean, I was living in a basement apartment, working as a supplies, sub teacher, no jobs available for full time. I had $2,000 in savings, doing nothing, sitting there collecting dust. Would have been like 3% a year. Who cares? Whatever. And I saw crypto in May 2017, and I saw this. I was like, okay, here's a chance. Here's some asymmetric upside. Bitcoin's rallying. I mean, it was at all-time highs when I bought it at like $1,800. And I bought some, and then I thought, and it was like May 2017, right? Things were going parabolic in altcoins. I thought they were never going to come back down. And I FOMO'd in a $10,000 credit line, which was like a big gamble to me. But I was sitting there, I had $15,000 in student debt, and I said, I'm going to pay that off in 7 years at this rate, or like, let's fucking moon it. And I took that risk. I knew I had an apartment and a job that I could, I'd survive. I had my bottom line. But it, it was a crazy year. It worked out. I had to take my shot. I felt I spent weeks sweating that and months sweating it after the fact. So I feel you as far as like that advice about just grind early, get out there, build your base. I am not recommending anybody ever take out a loan to go and buy crypto. Certainly not at these highs, just to make that clear. But that really resonated with me, because I actually had to do that basically from where I was living. I didn't feel like I had a chance to make it big. And now it's all about protecting everything you have. Once you get that nice, what you said, 50K, 10K. I think once you have that base, you can take more risks.
Yeah. So
and
I think that extends to like a variety of fields where the advice of people who have already done the thing that you want to do, sometimes that's really valuable, and sometimes there's just like a bit of a selection bias with who's left, or survivorship bias. And the things that are good for them now are not good for you, who's not in that position.
Yeah, knowing where you're at, and you made an interesting point earlier on about having a salary is a risk, right? Sitting doing a job that you don't necessarily love, spending time, the most valuable asset arguably to most people. There's risks in that too. And so as much as trading is gambling and betting on sports and DFS, if you found something you love, you found an edge, you've got a bankroll management system that can help you grow an equity curve, then you can take those risks and you enjoy it. Where's the risk there over time, right? So I really appreciate that take on it, because I often say that to people. I say, get off your ass, go out, do something you love. Don't spend too much time sticking it with a job if you don't absolutely love it, or if it doesn't pay really well, whatever. And they're saying, well, no, it's too risky. I was like, well, what about the risks of doing nothing and regretting that? So I think that's pretty solid for like an advice segment. Unless you have anything else like burning on the tip of your tongue you wanted to share, I want to get into some of the nitty gritty here. I got a few questions here for you I talked about earlier. What are some of the more exotic props, the weirdest things that you've bet on? I'm sure there's a couple nuggets in there.
I guess two are pretty weird. One is I bet a poker player that he couldn't learn Mandarin in 12 months, and he started to he lives in Vegas, and he went to Chinatown there and to meet people, and I believe he started to date someone who spoke Mandarin. He was thinking about moving to China, And he lost that bet. He wasn't even close. Mandarin is indeed very hard to learn.
All right. How much did you take him for on that?
Oh, that was well, I had to give him odds. Of course, that wasn't straight up. It was I think it was 7,500 to 45,000 or 50,000 or something like that.
So you basically said, I'll pay you 50K if in a year you can learn Mandarin.
That's right. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. That's a pretty good bet.
The weirdest bet that I did is something called the 6, 12, 18, 24 challenge. Do you know this?
Not offhand. No, you have to take me through that.
All right, we'll go through it. It's you have 4 activities that you need to do in 24 hours, and you need to assign a value to them. It's 6, 12, 18, or 24. So you can do whatever you want of each one. And the things that you need to do are masturbate, run miles, drink beers, and eat donuts. So I booked a bet with another DFS player, Adam Levitan, to do this, and I chose 6 miles, but there were conditions. I had to run it outdoors in Vegas during the summer, so that was hard. And then 12 masturbations, 18 donuts, and 24 beers is what I did.
Oh, okay. So you take those 4 numbers, you mix those 4 things, you have to do them in whatever order.
Yeah. So what
within one day?
What would you do if you?
Well, there's certain limits to the human abilities, and how do you confirm that somebody's getting off that many times in a day?
We had a guy in a hazmat suit, and then
this is that shit you talk about that stays in Vegas, I think, a lot of times. I mean, there's limits. Like I don't think I could take 18 or 24 in a day, so I'd have to go 6 or 12 on rubbing one out. God, and I can't run. I mean, donuts are definitely getting 24 because I just like eating donuts. That's easy.
I could do a Krispy Kreme like standard donuts, so it couldn't be something small. Those okay. It's actually pretty hard to do that and drink the beers because
oh god, yeah, I forgot about the beers.
They don't go well together.
I mean, beer and donuts have to probably be 18, 24. Just
as
far as like my physical capabilities. And I can't run 12 miles, so that basically answers your question right there. Yeah, I'd probably have to match you. I'd say 6 miles. 12 sessions. Oh, that would.
Yeah. So I had to do. I had to do the miles outside of Vegas, and then I had to do them consecutively. And I think there was an hour time limit or something. So I had to do it. I mean, it wasn't. I couldn't just like walk miles or something. I had to do it pretty fast. So I had to train for that. So that was the main part I was training for
the run.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the rest of it, I mean. It sounds like it could be fun if you didn't have to pace it so much. Just drink a beer, sitting down, eating donuts, jerking off, and I just made $10,000. So, did you win the bet? How much did you bet?
It was 6,000, I believe.
Okay, and you took it down.
Yep.
And then what? So somebody says like, no, you can't. They bet against you. They take the other side.
Yep. I don't even know how we got on that, but.
I mean, yeah, it sounds like somebody here had actually heard about this challenge before you said it. He said, "Oh my God, here it comes." So, this is a pretty famous challenge, I imagine. I've written it down. I'm gonna see which one of my buddies next summer wants to go for a run.
I would say it is very difficult. I think most people would probably fail. It's tough.
I mean, it sounds gross, like just eating all those donuts and all that beer. Now that I think about it, like individually, it is all fun. And I mean, I always really turned off by shit like hot dog eating contests and all that stuff. I just find it like, this guy's just like chugging it. I just want to puke watching it. But I mean, hell, when you're in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
So you live in Vegas? Is that where you're living right now?
No, I'm in Philly.
Okay, so you just go down there for sort of business, so to speak. What are some of the other, what's some of that other shit that just doesn't stay in Vegas? What do you want to share with us today? I know you got some other big crazy prop bets or some funny stories. Anything you can share that won't ruin your career or out anybody?
I mean, I've had fun things that have happened in Vegas. I don't know that they're good stories. I have other bets that I've booked there. I mean,
Some biggest wins, biggest losses, grossest fourth quarter, half court, garbage time, parlay busters. I've got one of those if you can't tell.
I'd be interested to hear yours, but I mean,
Yeah.
most of mine are in DFS, so it's not Vegas specific or anything like that. I mean, I've had a couple of misclicks where like I would like the same thing that I won last night. I have lost because I clicked the player next to the player that I was supposed to click, and like the guy was out, and I just lost because of a misclick and stuff like that. That happens, and yeah, that's definitely that's not fun.
Yeah, that's gross. I imagine that would be something along the lines of people buying the wrong coin. There's a few examples of that where, news comes out for coin X, and then there's like a coin Y that sounds just like it, and it pumps, and then people buy that, and the next day it's back to zero.
Yeah.
Brutal.
One of the sickest beats that I've ever seen. It didn't happen to me. I don't even know who it was a few weeks ago in the Millionaire Maker on DraftKings in the showdown. I think it was a Monday night. Someone created a unique lineup, which is pretty rare in a one game contest, and they won this super top heavy tournament, $1 million to first. One person they won, and then there was a stat correction, and they dropped, and there were all these people with another lineup that beat them, and they dropped from $1 million to 6,000.
Oh my
God!
God!
Probably one of the worst ones I've ever seen.
After the tournament was closed.
Yeah, so they think they win. There's some period where they're allowed to do stat corrections, and if they change the stats, then DraftKings will honor that, and they changed it, and he lost.
Oh my God! Can you imagine the phone calls that guy made in the hour following that game?
Yeah.
I hope he didn't spend too much of it. Just like sign me up for this trip. I'm going to Vegas, and then. Oh my God, that's painful. I mean, I've had in season-long fantasy, most people will hear about a stat correction that came in the playoffs where maybe, my buddy got an extra save on his goalie. We play NHL, and he's already out, so he lost in the semis last year, and then goalie gets an extra save, would have won him the championships, but he's already lost, like that kind of stuff. But I mean, $1 million to 6,000. Talk about swings. That's disgusting.
Yeah, the swings are sick. Like I don't have any good advice to deal with that one.
No, I mean that just makes my stomach hurt as somebody who spends a lot of time looking at charts and gambling in a sense, and did a lot of sports betting in my 20s. Yeah, I mean, I think my worst, and this is actually what ended my sports betting career, if you'll call it that. I did a sports blog, if you will, or more of a handicapping thread on SBR forums back in the day. But I actually had a parlay. Okay, well, this is a separate story, but I basically had a week with my bookie where I was in the hole for about $1,800, which was a decent amount in my early 20s. And I'd been doing really well that season. It was like week 5 NFL. I'm probably up 4 or 5K on them, but I'm in the hole for 1,800. And it's Sunday night. You clear the book at midnight, and I didn't have the risk management that I should have. So what do? I don't even bet on basketball, but I found the 10:30 game on Sunday night, and I'm just sitting there like, one of these guys is going to bail me out, right? It's a 7.5 point spread. I don't even remember the teams. Didn't matter because I didn't watch NBA. So I'm watching the game here, the sweat of my life. I'm sitting there, $1,800 on one side to win by 7.5, and they were up 9. And NBA up 9, minute left. Nobody's even playing anymore. They're just walking off the clock. And the guy on the other team, they're down 9, and the guys are walking off the court. There's a few seconds left. He just dribbles up casually, gets the half court, shoots it up, and then doesn't even look, just walks away, drains it naturally. And they ended up losing by 6 points at that point. And so I'm just sitting there and I'm like, did that count? The buzzer went, and I was like, oh yeah, it counted. So that roasted me for another 1,800. So I ended up, basically blowing that season's gain. And I quit. I paid my bookie, and I decided to go. I went back. So that was a career ender for me early. But that just speaks to risk management, and sort of, I guess, how I would apply that to trading now is when I'm up, I don't just add risk, and I'll make like whatever amount on a trade, and I don't suddenly turn around and be like, oh, because I just made $4,000, I'm going to go and buy all these shit coins. Like, treat every dollar the same. I learned that the hard way a few times, and that's my sports betting sort of
Yeah, it's the
max
same. Yeah,
defense.
same thing in gambling or any investment. Like at any given time, you have X dollars to invest, and you have this allocation, and what happened to get to that point is effectively irrelevant. The only way that it matters is insofar as it affects your future decision making. That what happened is going to affect the future, but how you got there should be mostly irrelevant.
And that's the hard part, I think, about crypto. And going back to sort of your advice on sort of what happens if you slide, if you're on tilt, if you're on a bad run, it can be very hard because crypto doesn't stop. It's not like, okay, it's Sunday's over, I'm going to chill to the next week. I might even skip week 8 of NFL, whatever. Crypto is just going, and it can drive you crazy because, and I've even felt this in the past few weeks when my account's doing pretty well this summer, and I'm just like, do I want to call tops? Do I want to just pull some out? Am I even thinking about it too much? Maybe I just need to like flat my account. And it can be torturous if you don't have the capacity, if you don't have the strategies in place to really unplug yourself or find a way to hedge your account, talking about options and insurance and buying puts. So that's really something we're going to focus on in the show more and more as we talk about risk management. And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from what you talked about today. I mean, if you manage risk and you have a plan, you don't have to live the sweat. I mean, there will be swings, there'll be variance, but you don't have to sit there in like despair when you just don't win or if you take a loss. And so my number one advice as well would be just don't put yourself in that situation.
Yeah. I don't have the same. I do have experience dealing with it in crypto, but not full time. It is different in DFS and poker. I mean, poker can continue. DFS, it ends, and you don't need to deal with it anymore. And so going on tilt, it's somewhat of a factor, but it sort of naturally takes care of itself. But I would still reiterate that the risk management stuff is probably like staying in the game type thing is probably for the top 1 or 2% of people. And otherwise, you should probably find some other way to make money. You just pulled
my next point out of my head.
You're gonna put in like $2,000 and Bitcoin goes up 100% and you made $2,000. Like, who cares? You're not going to get rich putting in a small amount of money. It's impossible.
Yeah,
like you have to make a lot of money some other way.
Yeah, cash flow, I think, is another point I was actually just thinking as you brought that up. If you have some income in your life, if you can establish side income, cash flow, whatever it is. Sometimes people ask me, they say, "Hey, dude, you're doing well with trading. Why do you do all these streams? Why do you work? Why do you have that job? Like, why don't you just live free and have a laptop and go and be a crypto trader?" But first of all, I like working with a team and being part of something, but I also just like to have that cash flow. Have a job, find something you are good at that someone will pay you for your time, and do that, and then you can take more risks. I can only take the risks that I'm taking right now because I know at the end of the month I'll have the rent paid. And I'm also fortunate. I don't know what your situation is, kids, wife, family, house, mortgage. But if you limit your liabilities, you can also take more risk. There's a few things you can do to really shift in your favor early on, especially. I think it's tough to take risk if we have family to take care of.
Certainly. I think that I've probably been biased in that way in general when I write or things that I talk, recommend or in general, the way that I think is probably more biased towards someone that doesn't have that. I don't have kids. I have a girlfriend, but I don't have a family per se. So certainly when you have that, the assessment changes and you need to raise your floor, things like that.
Considerably. Yeah. I mean, you can't throw the deep ball if you're feeding a family of 4 and whatever. So I think, and for those of you maybe who are watching and saying, well, fuck, man, that doesn't help me out. There's still opportunity out there to take risks and manage. I think it's, I think the bottom line is manage risk. If you look at compounding gains, if you do some math, if you do 1% a month, whatever it is, you got to be in it for the long haul. I think people most often lose their shirts because they're not willing to wait. They want it now. They want it today. They want to make the big play now. and they end up buying tops, because when you're trying to make the big play, you often wait till it feels easy, right? You want to see that thing shooting up, and then you're like, okay, now I'm ready to take the risk. It's definitely happening. And it's like, oh, that was the top. So, I mean, we're going to, like, we talk about this stuff a lot on stream, but it, you know, it really helps coming from someone like yourself who does this for a living, who, you know, has the cash flow in place, has the bankroll management in place. And you seem like you got a really good flow going on these days. So,
oh, I don't know, but I mean, in terms of like, the point you just brought up of thinking long term, I think there's maybe one of the biggest edges, no matter what you're doing, whether it's trading or gambling or business, is just to think long term and try to optimize your decisions or whatever for 5 years from now. So, like, what is best for the me that exists in 5 years? And when you do that, the math on the decision changes so much. Like, you know, if you're trying to optimize for short-term revenue in a company, it's kind of like trying to optimize for your happiness in a given day. You're not going to work out. You're not going to eat healthy. You're not going to sleep well. You're not going to read. And those are probably the best things you could do if you're trying to optimize for the you that exists in 5 years. It changes absolutely everything. So if you sort of think about whatever you're trying to solve for, whether it's happiness or money or whatever, in dynamic terms, and think about how it can compound over time, the things that you do now will probably change.
Yeah, you know what? You just pulled some principles out. I wonder if you've read this book by James Clear called Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits? Yeah. I have it right there behind me. Yeah.
Good man. Yeah, I've got it on my table here.
Yeah.
Actually, right. Yeah. So, I mean, that I showed that book on here a few times, and that's really those principles right there, you know. And it's interesting. He says, you know, it's like some of the bad habits, all of your bad habits are gratifying now, and they harm you few days out, few years out, few months out. And the opposite is often true for good habits. A lot of your good habits are something maybe this exact moment is not the first thing you want to do, but they will serve you well in the days and weeks and months.
Yeah, and I think it's especially hard for people in trading or DFS, sports betting, who are naturally probably more degenerate, short-term oriented. You know, to have that sort of mindset that goes against what they feel like they should do. And I probably make more. I think I make more short-term oriented decisions than most people, but the important ones I think should be long-term. It doesn't mean like you can never go party with your friends or something. It just means you know, in business or your job, your trading, if that's what you do full time, that the decisions that you make should probably be a little bit more optimized for down the road than they are.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point to make, I think, especially in trading, because, you know, like today we're sitting in a triangle, we're bull flagging, bear flagging, whatever it's going to be, it's a bull flag. But, you know, it's like, do you want to make any big major decisions with your portfolio today when the weekly is in a bullish trend and we haven't really confirmed any reversal to that? And there's a lot of people this morning that probably said, that's the top, and they dumped it. I mean, you could find ways to apply this stuff to trading incredibly powerfully, so to speak, over the next couple of years, because that's the big edge that I think I bring myself as a trader, and a lot of the longer term traders bring, is that we are thinking in long term. I don't care what happens to my portfolio today or this week. I want to see an equity curve in the 2 to 8% a month range, and that's high. But each and every day that goes by doesn't really shake it, and that's important. And I think a lot of people get held up on their dollar value every day, day to day, and it'll drive you crazy. And if you zoom out, it's probably what's causing a lot of bad decisions. So I'm really glad you brought that point up as well. Now, as we get to the top of the hour, I know you got to run close pretty soon, actually, but is there any other, I mean, I feel like there's got to be more stories. I just want to pull one more out of you. Big, any big bets, exotic, weird shit that comes to mind. We kind of went over the bulleted ones we had earlier. I don't put you on the spot here. Some degen shit, the most degen shit you can think of. Maybe somebody else's bet. You're like, oh my God, I saw this one guy in Vegas. He just walked down the street. He had no shirt on because like whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those. Yeah, I mean, there's a former poker player and DFS player, Empire Maker, who just made $7 million on the election, betting people on Twitter, and it seemed like I mean, he has a lot of money, but it seemed like he was being pretty degen.
Jesus, I'm so salty about that.
I believe the poker player Antonio Esfandiari,
magician.
He had a bet that he had a lunge everywhere for 24 hours. Like he had to go to poker tournaments and walk all around Vegas, but he had a lunge. And I guess that's, it seems like it would probably be pretty painful.
Sounds awful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he got disqualified he was in a poker tournament, got disqualified because he pissed in a bottle at the table because he didn't want to get up and go to the bathroom.
Okay, that's exactly what I was looking for. Esfandiari kicked out of a tournament for pissing in a bottle because he didn't want to lunge to the bathroom. You heard it here, folks. That shit happens in Vegas. I've been to Vegas twice, played in a few tournaments, nothing too crazy. Couple good stories, but I don't think I can top that one or any of those. I really appreciate you coming on today. And if there's anything else, burning or interesting or some plugs for your upcoming stuff for your company that you want to share, I'm going to check out Fantasy Labs because I do degen on DFS every once in a while at my buddy's house on Sundays, and I'd like to have a little bit of an edge there. So I just, probably about time I looked into it a little. As we're talking about it, I'm realizing that I just literally throw darts at guys that were good 3 years ago, like Julio Jones.
It's probably like me trading. Like in 2017, I was trading, and it's like, what I was doing, you guys were probably just like completely laugh at, and it's so sophisticated now. And that's how DFS is like, it's just knowing sports or something is like who cares? Like you're gonna get killed.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to hockey, man. If they'll start the hockey season again, that is one. I mean, I've lost my edge a little in the last couple of years because I've been focusing on crypto, but that's definitely one where I feel like I can grab an edge. Football's crazy, man. There's just like, you got to know the linemen, you got to know the tendencies of the offensive coordinator, and then do they run? Do they, there's so much depth to it. Whereas in hockey, if you're top power play center and you're a third line center at cheap, like just grab them. Plays with Stamkos, send them in. They're going to get their minutes, right? But how many times, like these guys who win these DFS tournaments and they've got like a backup running back in their lineup, I'm like, who the hell drops $20 on that guy in the $1 million thing? Like, it's always something like that. It's crazy. I can't do it. So I like to fuck around, but
I'm sure there's something analogous in crypto where you're not the game type in DFS, of course, dictates your strategy, and in those fields with super top heavy payouts, you're not necessarily looking for the best play in a vacuum. You're looking for the best play relative to what other people think. So you're looking for high leverage. And I guess trading in crypto is sort of like, that's the entire thing, is looking for leverage, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's my whole thing on here is like reload zones, right? Like buying the dips this morning, there was a big dump. It was right into a reload zone at 14.8. I mean, all I was thinking is, do I want to buy or not? Where average, everyone else participating, they're like, oh shit, should I be selling? This is a big dump. And just having those, levels drawn up before so that you can think clearly when there's big moves.
So I guess I would leave with how important I think it is to understand like the natural way that people think, and figuring out ways to overcome those natural biases that you have, because they are inherent to everyone, and the way that you think the world is almost guaranteed to be wrong. You see the world through some certain lens, and I think for certain I'm right, and you think for certain you're right, and we're probably both wrong. And humans in general succumb to the same types of biases, and they make their way into how you think about DFS or trading, and figuring out a way to think rationally and sort of step outside of yourself and your natural emotions about how things should be done is so pivotal. It's especially pivotal in crypto. Yeah, I guess what I said from Dalio's advice to use those emotions that you know are irrational, or even if you don't think they're irrational, anytime you feel emotional, use that as a trigger to try to think logically about its decision, as if it's someone else's. I think that's very, very useful no matter what field you're in.
Okay, well, you just opened up a can of worms, and we gotta unpack this. I know and this is why I started my wrap comment 10 minutes early. I told the producer, I said, look, we're gonna start wrapping up 10 minutes early because we always run long. I got you for 10 more minutes. We got to talk about this is something that I wanted to bring up earlier, and you just kind of brought it up. Cognitive bias is huge, and you just kind of touched on it. And really, it's these higher level things like self-care, right? People, yeah, we're degens, we go hard, we 20x, 100x long, but they don't want to sit back and maybe acknowledge that self-care, some of that nitty gritty stuff that you got to do, wake up, work out, eat well, sleep. These guys are, I see a lot of guys glamorizing, why sleep, crypto 24/7. What is the number one thing that turns off on your brain when you don't have enough sleep? It's your emotional regulation. It's your ability to even think straight. And so what you just brought up is like my favorite topic in this, as far as, the less sexy side of, the glamorous side of trading and daily fantasy. And that's identifying your cognitive bias and reflecting. I mean, where would you place self-care as far as like your edge goes in the market? I mean, you did 2,400 push-ups in 12 hours. You obviously work out. I mean, where would you place that? Would you be where you are today if you didn't have a gym regimen, if you didn't have, healthy diet, whatever?
No, it's not like I'm like work out all the time, or I'm the best at staying and getting great sleep. But yeah, overall, I think that I do. Sleeping is probably the most important of them all. If I don't know I can't feel what other people feel, but I feel like if I don't get good sleep, my IQ is like 50 points lower. Like, I'm so dumb. I can't do anything. Like,
yeah. No, I'm a cranky bitch. I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm not eating well. Get away from me. Like, and I then the days I do trade anyways, it reflects on my account. I'm like, fuck, why did I long that? That was a stupid thing to do. And it almost always comes back to that sleep stuff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that even now that I'm like 33, I don't know how old you are, but I'm up 33 now. Like, I stay up till midnight on a Friday, and I'm like tired on Tuesday. Like, it starts to catch up with you more and more.
Yeah. I think sleeping is probably number one. At least it is for me. It's related to the other things like working out and stuff, which will help regulate your sleep. But yeah, I mean, people that brag about not sleeping and stuff. Not only do I think that isn't useful, it's long term.
It's harmful.
That's like the exact opposite of what I want to do. Like, people want to make money for whatever reasons. Mine is not to like have a lot of money. It's to be free, and needing to stay up to try to make more money doesn't sound that free to me. What's free is waking up whenever you want. And if you want to go do this, you go do this. And, you want to go on a trip, you go on a trip. That's freedom to me. And I want to put myself in a position to do that, and need to stay up all the time to make money. Sounds like about the least free thing that I can think of.
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle on that. And, I think being in the Eastern time zone, New York kill zone, I think the world likes to fuck with us. At least we like to think so, where it's 2, 3 a.m., where it's like the Euro, I think that's Euro kill zone basically is where London kill zone, they do a lot of movements, right? You'll see the perfect pivots. They seem to always come in at 3 a.m. But with a proper trading plan, I've found ways to work around that. I can actually just lay bids, asks, alerts. I wake up, I'm like, oh, look at that, filled, and then it bounced, and you're like, good thing. So there's definitely ways to work around that, but I need to sleep, I need to eat, I need to work out, to think up those plans so that I can sleep. So it's an interesting positive feedback loop. And I would be willing to bet right now that if my advice to someone today, our advice to someone today was start a good sleep regimen, 8 hours a night, hit the gym every single morning for 5 days a week, and eat relatively healthy, cut fast food out. And in 2 months, tell me how your equity curve looks. I would imagine it's going to translate into profits if they're trading regularly. And if it doesn't, at least they're in shape now and they're sleeping well, right? Like, it's kind of a low risk endeavor.
Yeah, also those things that are so important. We're not debating if it's important, right? So like, is working out good for you? We all know it's good for you. We know it's good for your mental health and physical health, of course. So if it doesn't work out in 2 months, it's very easy to stick with it. It's very easy to be process oriented with that.
Yeah.
We don't really need to look at results because it's not debatable whether working out is good for you.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean. It's like, that's a good point. It's a low risk thing to take on. I mean, it sucks sometimes. I mean, early on, the first 2 weeks of a new regimen, I always, because I swing in and out. I'll fall off, right? And then it's a few months later, I'm like, okay, it's time to get back. And that's my Achilles heel. But it's that first week or two can be a grind. But it's never once, where I'm at the end of like a month of working out, I'm like, damn, I regret that. That sucks. So it's one of those gifts that keeps on giving. And maybe something to leave somebody with today as we wrap our conversation up, because that's what people want. They want the sure thing. They say where buy, when sell, when target, what moon. But I can't tell you guys that. Nobody can. But what we can do day in and day out is focus on a process that will take us in a probability sense closer to where we want to be, whether that's more time, whether that's more money, a greater degree of success in whatever measure you have. And there's certain guarantees you can have. And self-care to me is probably the easiest one to lock in. And I'd say it should be the first. And sounds like based on what we talked about today, you're in line with that. So
of course, and I don't have like a great natural motivation to go work out. I don't like to work out. Like I'm not one of those psychos that is like, oh man, I need to work out. Like I hate working out. It sucks. Like who wants to work out? Like what are you guys talking about? Working out is awful. Like I don't want to be there. So you look like long term. But the best way to do it is to book a bet. Like if you want to do something that have downside, like real financial downside, book a bet with a friend. I've done one where I have to pay $1,000 every time I have a sip of alcohol, or if you don't work out 4 times a week, you need to pay $1,000, or you have other whatever body fat percentage type of bet over X period, and I guarantee you will be motivated. You'll go. And
that's an interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's actually from Atomic Habits. He talked about that. He wrote up a contract, one of these guys in there. He said, if I don't hit the gym X number of days a week, I owe you $500 at the end of the month or something. And he was in the best shape of his life. So we'll see. I might have to lay a bet with the producer, get my ass in gear, because I set up a home gym now. The gyms are closed because of COVID. We'll see. Might be a vaccine coming out. But okay. That's a really good point. Okay, we're going to end on that today. Lay some money down on the losing side of your self-care if you want to kick your motivation up. From Jonathan Bales on Hxro Labs Live. Thanks so much, guys, for coming out to watch today. I will be back on Friday. Nick will be on Wednesday, and we'll see what content we can get out for you in the meantime as the alt market starts to pick up. ETH BTC just hit a weekly higher low. Let's hope. And Bitcoin is possibly kicking into a bull flag, or even going to find its own range up here around 16K. So with that, I really appreciate you coming on today, Jonathan Bales. And it's just so good to see you and talk to you and get all the nitty gritty on sort of your life and what's brought you that success. So thank you for coming to share it with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And we'll take care. And how could I close off? What's in your bag? What are you holding? What cryptos do you got? My God, the most important question. Last one.
It's very boring. I only have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Binance right now.
Okay. I'm so glad you didn't say Ripple on that last one there. We would have had to extend this and talk a little bit about that. Okay. So you got a little BNB, a little Ethereum, and a little Bitcoin. That sounds like a pretty solid portfolio for someone who's not actively trading every day. Those are 3 long bets. I like them. All right. Take care, everybody. Whatever you do from here until the next time, always play from a position of strength.